Mount Everest ain't got shit on me.
Welcome back to Gino HD. On the road to DEKA, we are looking at what information we can use to our advantage to make sure that we are at the optimal stage of competition. So a while back, I went to a pretty much full body MOT at Randox, and they had this whole system set up. They do your full BMI check, they stick you on scales, they take your blood, they check your VO2 max, and they give you this tailored report. And I thought it'd be interesting to go through it, and you can kind of see where I'm at. I'm currently sitting around 240 pounds. So, and I had to fast for about 6 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the report like to my left or to my right, and we'll just go through. I have it in front of me here, and what I'm going to be doing is facing the monitors and just going through what the information says and pointing out anything that's quite interesting. So I think it's good to be data driven, and this is primarily just to kind of show how I'm working and how that might affect my training, and then how I can maybe get things back into a healthy mix to be more competitive in the future. So first things first, we are looking at the full body composition analyzer, which just shows like a spectrum of information going from my body fat percentage to visceral fat to muscle mass. So what I'm going to do is just pick at bits, bit by bit, and go through it together. So right now I'm looking at the BMI, body mass index. So what is BMI? So BMI is calculated from an individual's weight and height, and is an indication of body fat and can identify weight problems. In terms of whether an individual is underweight, overweight or obese, such weight problems are risk factors for conditions such as heart disease, high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cancer and respiratory problems. Yikes. So as it stands here, it says I have a BMI. Obviously, this doesn't take into account muscle mass. It just takes into account total weight. So it says here, I have a BMI of 37.1%. And in this category, it's a classification of obese. Am I obese? No. However, again, because it doesn't take into account muscle mass, as we go through the listings, you'll see how my muscle mass is. And that takes into consideration, or it allows me to take into consideration, that things aren't too bad. So back in the past, I've had a lighter BMI, but yeah, this just is an indication of, right, if I'm going to look at being a bit more competitive, my aim is to get within the more optimal BMI ranges. And again, the lighter you are, the quicker you move. So that's just something there. Looking at the screen, my weight is 109 kg, so that's about 240 pounds. It says desirable weight for me is 58 to 73.5 kg. And yeah, it says here my fat percentage is 27.3%, and my muscle mass is 75.4 kg. So in terms of fat mass, it says I've got a fat mass of 29.8 kg, and I have a muscle mass of 75.4 kg. So again, that all tallies into your BMI. So if you think about it, if I had an obese BMI reading and my fat mass was more than my muscle mass, fair enough. However, fat mass is 29.8 kg and muscle mass is 75.4 kg. So that is very interesting. It says here for fat mass, the ideal for me would be 6.9 to 19.8 kg. So, 10 kg off fat, and that would be desirable. And for the muscle mass, it says there that desirable is 49.8 to 63.1 kg. So I'm above average, man. I'm above average. Interestingly enough, when it comes to weight, you'll see in the segmental analysis with my muscle mass where I hold the most amount of muscle. So my trunk, so waist down, is I hold 38.8 kg in muscle. Each arm, right and left, are 5.4 kg, and each leg is 12.9 kg. So you've got to think, like, so for someone who's a bigger runner, who's doing something like a Hyrox or a DEKA, and you want to be competitive, you want to be fast, you want to be, completely, attack each obstacle. As you're moving along, the more muscle you have, the slower you might move. More, because the energy it takes for you to, if you're doing skiing, if you're doing rowing, if you're doing lunges, the energy it takes for you to just move yourself requires a lot more than someone who's got less muscle mass. So again, this is all really interesting. If we look at the physique rating, which again is all here, it says here that I am solidly built, so I'll take that. And yeah, interestingly enough, if we look at the fat for this segmental analysis, I have here that my trunk is about 30.5% fat. My right arm and left arms are about 21.7% fat, and my left leg and right leg are about 24% fat. So I've got big legs. I've got really big legs. Looking at my leg muscle score, my body fat distribution, and my muscle mass balance, I'm pretty much balanced in terms of muscle mass. That's perfect. I've got here that my leg muscle score is below the average of this curve. However, my body fat distribution is slightly above the average for for most males, which is where it is. That's not too bad. In terms of what else we're looking at for the information, typically when people are looking at, okay, well, how do I know what my BMR is? How can I work out my macronutrients to tailor my nutrition to make sure I can hit these desirable categories of my weight? And I, typically when you're working out your macros, you want to know what your BMR is. So if you wanted to know what your BMR is, this gives a good indication of that. So it says here that my BMR, so basal metabolic rate, so basically what you need to eat, well, what your body needs throughout the day without eating anything, just to survive. So these are your baseline calories. And it says here that my BMR is 2,387 calories. So, that's how much my body burns throughout the day. Just at a minimum, I need those amounts of calories to survive. So if I really wanted to focus on creating a nutritional goal to utilize my BMR and then to add on top of that for my nutritional intake to be optimal, this is a good starting point. If you go online and type in BMR to macro calculator, you'll find tons of ways. Typically they'll say get your BMR, times it by, and they'll have different categories of light active, medium active, very active, extremely active, and it's a percentage of 1.1 to 1.2 to 1.5, and you usually get times your BMR by that category that you fit yourself in, and you'll typically find that your macros for cutting or for maintenance would be a few thousand or a few hundred above your basal metabolic rate. So this is an interesting measure to say, okay, well, now I'm going into this with full knowledge of how my baseline, my absolute baseline. So yeah, this is very, very interesting to say the least. On top of this body mass analyzer, you also get given a personal health measurements pack, which I'll have on the screen here. And it just goes through my personal health measurements, which we've talked about, BMI. It goes through my waist circumference. So again, waist circumference relates closely to BMI and is part of the waist to hip ratio measurement. Waist circumference is a measure of central or abdominal fat and provides additional information on disease risk and other long-term health problems. Increased weight around the abdomen can increase the risk of developing conditions such as type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, coronary heart disease, and high blood pressure. So it says here I'm at a moderate risk with a 94 to 102 reading there. Again, this is interesting because obviously if I was at that obese stage and my waist circumference was that of more leading to obese, this would be a higher risk. But a moderate risk, I'm okay with that. And then it goes into my heart health. So again, this is about cholesterol, LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol. It says here that LDL describes a cholesterol that is bound to low density lipoprotein. So they're responsible for transporting cholesterol into the blood, and it deposits excess cholesterol in the walls of the blood vessels, which can narrow blood vessels and lead to blockage of blood flow to organs such as to the heart and brain. So that's not good. Increased LDL levels are associated with increased risk of, words I can't say, stroke and liver disease. So it says here I'm pretty high. So obviously there's a lot of talk about how to increase or decrease what's good, if it's good to have good cholesterol or bad. So obviously this leads into how can I make better, smarter food choices to help get this into more desirable range. But yeah, it's quite high, but I'm not there by a margin. You know, HDL cholesterol describes the cholesterol that is bound to high density lipoproteins, and they're responsible for transporting cholesterol into the blood. HDL is protective as it removes cholesterol from certain tissues and transports it back to the liver for removal from the body. And a low level of HDL is undesirable and is associated with increased risk of, again, another word that I can't say, it says accumulate. It means the accumulation of cholesterol and fatty materials within blood vessel walls. Okay, which you don't want. And yeah, if it's uncontrolled, can lead to diabetes. And, you know, it's linked to lack of exercise and associated with a lot of, you know, negative stuff. So it says here that I'm low and I need to be more towards the desirable. Looking at blood pressure, because they took blood pressure readings on both arms. So blood pressure is important. It's a measure of the force applied to the walls of the arteries as the heart pumps blood through the body. Systolic blood pressure refers to the pressure of blood as your heart contracts. Diastolic blood pressure refers to the pressure of the blood as your heart rests between the beats. So high blood pressure is a significant risk factor for the development of heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, and metabolic syndrome. Dehydration, bleeding, inflammation, infection, heart disease, pregnancy, and various medications can cause low blood pressure. Physical fit individuals may have low blood pressure, and in some individuals, blood pressure is naturally low. So looking at this, it says that I'm in the normal ranges for blood pressure, which is absolutely perfect. And then apart from that, it gives me my heart health. So essentially what we've talked about earlier with cholesterol and other ratios, it's you know, a lot of greens. So this is good. Again, with the cholesterol bit, yes, fair enough. Like there's various conversations around it, so I'm not too concerned. But apart from that, majority of this is, as we go through, that I'm not going to, you know, look at too deeply, apart from the cardiovascular risk score is good, and it says that I'm actually in a desirable range, so my heart health is actually quite solid. And then also it goes to diabetes health. So diabetes mellitus is a chronic condition that is characterized by a high blood glucose level. So again, typically it's a bad time to have diabetes if you're trying to avoid it. And luckily for me, it says I'm in an optimal range. So not high, not pre-diabetic, not low. So this is completely great for me. Again, kidney health, we can see here that there's some high elements, but urea, I'm in the optimal range. So obviously your kidneys help with the production of urea, and you want to be optimal. You don't want to have kidney disease or kidney infections. If urea is high, you're more likely prone to have kidney infections and disease. So that's what we want to avoid. And then, yeah, pretty much you have results that go to your doctor, and then they give you a handy nutrition guide which talks about, how you can add different foods, how you can exercise, and how you can typically try to get your readings back into the optimal range. So pretty much that concludes the data-driven analysis of where my body is at. Honestly, it's very interesting. Randox Health, again, not sponsored. I didn't even say if it was sponsored to begin with, but it's not sponsored. But yeah, Randox Health, we're doing an awareness drive, and they were doing free health checks. So I just jumped onto it and was able to get this body MOT for free. If you see any drives that they look at doing on the site, then definitely jump on it. But this gives me a very much informed position to go, right, this is where my body fat's at, this is where my muscle mass is at. If I'm looking at training, do I need to focus on trying to build muscle when I've got a muscle mass of 75.4 kg? If I'm trying to be quick, should my focus be on reducing body fat and getting lighter? And so if that's the case, is it worth me doing bodybuilding style exercises, or is it worth me focusing more on conditioning pieces, cardio elements that take me away from traditional pump and iron? So yeah, this is very interesting. Again, BMR, very much useful information that you can use to try to develop a nutritional plan to get your weight down. And then equally, again, looking at how I'm balanced, it just shows to me that if I get my weight down to an optimal level, I'm pretty much fixed to be really athletic and really, make a dent in all of these competitions that I'm looking at entering into. But yeah, guys, different take on a road to DEKA Spain. So thank you for having an interest if you've gotten to this far of the video, and catch you on the next one.